Back after a 4-day hiatus, and it's the first day of spring, which we see rather calm weather in the east, although it's darn cold here in the southeast. And of course, winter storm warnings, flood watches, winter storm watches, and a whole bunch of other things going on. Where else but in the West, especially for California? That is nothing new either. All of this and more on today's Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area this spring. They've got mulch, topsoil, and sand, everything you need to make sure your home is landscaped perfectly. 631-756-1125. Nowhere can you find better prices. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And Joe, before we get into this, you might want to allow me to share my screen in case I need to share something.
Oh,
because
yes. Well, you may,
so.
yeah, that may happen. There is that possibility. Let's just say that.
All right.
So,
but thankfully the weather is fairly tranquil for these next few. I had a beautiful first day of spring, and an even nicer day coming up for tomorrow.
yeah, and while you're, I also had an equally beautiful day here from the standpoint of sky condition. However, this morning I had to recover from a low of 16.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and yesterday with a low of, what was the low yesterday? I think 21 or 22. But the temperatures did not get out of the 30s. It was, and there was a bit of a wind.
Yeah.
So it was very cold. You know, when you've already had your first 80-degree day, it's not fun when you get back down to temperatures that you saw, not all the time, but you did see from time to time during the winter, and even lower. It was brutal. But today, it broke over 50. If you stand out in the sun and there's no wind, it feels a lot warmer than that. So that's good. And yeah, we've got another major mess in the west, but here in the east, Joe, it looks pretty calm for at least certainly into the middle part of the week, and then maybe it gets a little dicey toward the end of the week and into the weekend. But we're going into the season that I think you would agree is probably the worst season
The
of the
most
year.
the most depressing
Yes.
part of the year.
Particularly in the Northeast, not so much
Yeah.
here, but particularly in the Northeast. This
Yep.
is not a love spring. Where did the idea that spring? Well, obviously it didn't come from the Northeast, but the idea that spring is this sort of wonderful, wonderful fairy tale of warm days and chirping birds, tweet, 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 flowers everywhere. Yeah, okay. Not in the Northeast, and probably for a good chunk of the northern Mid-Atlantic as well.
It's yeah, I tell you, it can be very, very depressing. And to echo a former colleague of ours, Norm Devoskin. Norm once said, March is the month that you're so happy when it arrives, but in some years you're even happier when it goes. And this may turn out to be one of those years, between the snowstorm and what we may be getting by the upcoming weekend. A real, folks, I hate that, and I'm hoping it changes, but Saturday looks like a really depressing, dare I say, ugly kind of day. Temps in the 40s, lots of cloud cover, and maybe periods of rain and a raw kind of northeast wind. That's all going to be bundled up into one big ugly package, maybe by the weekend. So yeah, Joe is absolutely right. Spring, you'd love to see more days like what we're going to see tomorrow, what we had today. But on the other hand, spring could be ugly and nasty, and we might be looking at that later in the week into the weekend.
Yeah, the curse of the onshore flow.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was never, and also just from a forecasting standpoint, spring is even, forecasting snow amounts is difficult enough, but forecasting in the spring in general is just torture sometimes.
Indeed.
Because these warm fronts set up, and they come through, they don't come through, they get hung up, and half your area gets on one side of the warm front, and it's in the 40s with a raw rain, and then on the other side of the warm front, it's in the 70s and sometimes even into the 80s. In New Jersey, in particular, where you could easily be in a situation where it's raw and on the northern part of the state and almost well into spring temperatures or maybe even almost summer like in parts of South Jersey. And you got to somehow figure out how to word a forecast to cover a 40-degree temperature range for high temperatures.
But as we have also pointed out on many occasions, when you get a significant snowfall, and I certainly had a significant snowfall, almost a foot of snow last Wednesday. Here we are now, less than a week after, and 97% of that snow is all but gone. And I'm sure the last 3% will go tomorrow, with temperatures locally here in the lower Hudson Valley pushing 2 or maybe even above 60. So one nice thing about getting a heavy snowfall at this time of the year, in more cases than not, it don't last very long, and this one didn't last very long indeed.
By the way, I don't know if you saw this, saw the snowfall graphic. I put it up, and it was running around on Twitter days ago. But the one of the lowest, technically, because 0.1 inch. I'm sure there were dozens and dozens of places that were on the southern edge and got 0.1 inch. But Saugerties in town got 0.1 inch. So the
Yeah.
lowest amount was recorded there, and 4 miles away in Palinville on a hill somewhere had the state's highest amount at 36 point, I don't know, was it 36.9 inches? I mean, literally 4 miles apart. And a little bit, and it wasn't that much higher in terms of elevation from a few people that posted about it. Basically you went like from 400 feet up to 800 feet. That was the difference.
Yeah.
But it speaks to it speaks to how what storms do usually in March and also in April, how they're elevation driven. And
Right.
people don't pay attention to forecasts during the standard winter where everybody's cold and you get when you get a snow event and everybody um, gets snow and you could broad brush a general area. You start having to deal with peaks and valleys. The village of Palinville, as Tom Contino, the actual village of Palinville hardly got anything. They also only got about 0.1, but it was on some hill nearby, very close by, that got the 3 feet, over 3 feet. So you have to pay attention, folks.
It's pretty amazing at this time of the year. I remember one particular storm many years ago. We're going back maybe now into either the 70s or the 80s. I used to have instantaneous knowledge of not only the year but the date. But it was back in the 70s and 80s where I think it was in April. Hardly anybody got anything, but in the Watchung Mountains, which is immediately to the west of New York City, they were just high enough to see 5, 6, 7 inches of snow. And I remember listening on the radio on WOR. They had George Meade or Fred Feldman in reporting traffic in the traffic copter, and one of them, I don't remember which one it was, said, "This is absolutely amazing." I said, "It's like looking at the Alps." It's only the Watchung Mountains, the tops of the mountains, the top of the peaks of the mountains were covered in thick snow. And again, you go down the mountains and like into the city, and it was nothing. It's elevation plays so much of a role, as you just said, Joe, in March and especially even in April when it comes to snow accumulations.
Johnny Quest on the chat board. By the way, welcome to everybody on the chat board. Welcome to those of you who are watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight. You're either on the chat board or you're lurking in the background. Subscribe to the Joe and Joe Weather Show so you can join the be part of the conversation. that takes place here almost every night, Monday through Thursday at 7:35, Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Um, there was no Sunday show yesterday. It had to be. We were trying to. I was trying to move it to 7:30, but that wasn't feasible, as I was not feeling well and had a family situation to deal with this weekend. So we'll see if we can get things back on schedule. Actually, we probably won't have a Sunday show this coming Sunday because I'm going to Florida for a few days. So
Oh,
you
oh,
know,
lovely.
because I'm going to go see visit some friends there. So but we'll come back on Monday and Tuesday. Anyhow, shall we?
Surely, let's. I don't think there's very much to talk about weather-wise. Johnny West just brought up on the chat board.
I was
Hate to
going to
change the
say
subject.
no. That's what I meant to say. I forgot. Sorry, Johnny. You go ahead. You got it, Joe.
That hate to change the subject, but is that Venus in the evening sky? It is very, very bright, and he's absolutely right. It's been so cloudy lately, and I've kind of missed out on seeing a lot of sky objects. But my God, I mean, you look up at the sky at night now, right after sunset, and you see, the bright stars of the winter season now bidding us a fond adieu over in the west. And then you look at Venus, and Venus is so much brighter than any of the other, like 15 or 20 times brighter than the brightest stars, Sirius, the dog star. It just stands out like a sore thumb. It's not a sore thumb, really. It's if I may use this metaphor, because it is, after all, Venus or Aphrodite, if you want to call it a different name for a goddess. It's like a sequined showgirl strutting her stuff out in the western sky. It is just absolutely dazzling. And so step outside. It'll be out there until about 9 or 9:30 this evening in the western sky, and it's just absolutely spectacular. Very, very, very beautiful sight.
All right. So let's give everybody a clear enough sky to see that. Certainly, I'll have that here.
Yes.
It seems. But checking out tonight's watches and warnings map, we are seeing a lot of purple in Tennessee. This is believe it's the, let's see, it started Saturday morning, Sunday's fourth night in a row where we've had widespread freeze warnings up for much of the South. Tennessee, most of Alabama, eastern Mississippi, the northern half of Georgia, South Carolina, except near the coast, and a good chunk of North Carolina, except for the mountains. It's been darn cold here, and people down here. It's funny because you get the new folks that have moved in from out of state think it's okay to plant annuals in March.
Yeah.
Okay, and they are warned. Even locals, all the locals will tell you, do not plant annuals in March because up in this area because well, as I said, it was the last 3 nights the lows were. Let's see, Saturday morning the low was 27. Sunday morning the low was 22. This morning the low was 16. So there you go. Meanwhile, winter storm watches up for eastern North Dakota. Thankfully, they didn't put anything in northern South Dakota where they have winter weather advisories. So they always mess that up. Also, northwestern Minnesota. And of course, we have, after what was a very brief break for the folks in the West, we have a slew of winter storm warnings up. You can't see them too well on the map because of the blending of all the other warnings and advisories in the southern half of California with wind advisories and high wind warnings. But there are also winter storm warnings up again for the mountains to the directly to the north and east of Los Angeles and San Diego. So they're going to get some big snows there. Also covering a good chunk of Nevada, the Sierra Nevada mountains, in Utah, up and down the middle part of the state, northwestern Arizona, western Colorado, and a few counties up in New Mexico. And checking out the satellite loop. Uh, we have a low that actually moved off the East Coast earlier today that's taking clouds from the old cold front and moving them away to the northeast, and that left pretty much everybody east of the Mississippi in sunshine except on the edges, with clouds up in northern New England and around the Great Lakes. See a lot of clouds building up in Texas, and of course It's quite the mess in the west there, Joe. A series of impulses coming in. Looks like another one's about to move in off the Pacific into California. Uh, they're going to have a lot of snow melting over there.
It was kind of weird for a short while late last week to actually see the map that had absolutely nothing regarding any kind of watch or warning or advisory out in California or for much of the western United States. Some things, however, never seem to change, and we're back to the same old story that we've seen so much of this winter and now early spring of 2023.
And by the way, I think that lasted less than a day because winter storm watches then went up. I believe on Friday they put them up for this coming system for what they got yesterday, and then for early next week. Anthony Sparaccio hitting the tip jar tonight. Thank you, Anthony. He's watching you and with your mom. Happy birthday to Anthony's mom, who's 90 today, Joe. 90.
Congratulations to Anthony's mom, and I know I know exactly how he feels right now because my mom got to the big 90 as well, and we should all be so lucky to make it that far in our lifetime.
And mine will be 89 this year. So, anyway, I thought I'd share that. So here we go. Here's our radar tonight. There's not really much of anything going on in the east. We've got some scattered precip around the Great Lakes. You can see some moisture trailing into Southern California from off the Pacific, and then it runs into Arizona and New Mexico. Some snow scattered in Utah and Colorado, also up into Idaho. And we got rain and some mountain snows going on in Washington and Oregon. But we don't have any kind of organized rotation in a sense. We don't have a big, swirling storm as you can often see during the month of March. As far as liquid precip is concerned for the next 7 days, looking for some big amounts in the Ohio and Tennessee Valley and down into the south, where some areas are going to get several inches or more. In the Northeast, it's basically 3/4 of an inch to an inch, inch and a quarter. Not much, hardly anything in Florida. And then we go out west, where we see ample precip being indicated from the higher elevations of the mountains in northern half of Arizona on up through Colorado. Some places forecast to get 3 or more inches of liquid precip, Joe. That's a lot of precip, and some of that's going to be snow. If not, in some places, all of it's going to be snow. That extends up into Idaho and then up and down the Pacific West. We're seeing several to many inches right along the coast of Southern California and extending inland into those mountains, which is why they have the winter storm warnings up. And speaking of those winter storm warnings, you can see what WPC is doing with the probability for at least 2 over the next 7 days. Ample in the west, particularly as you go into the southwest, into Nevada, Utah, northern Arizona, and then you see the patchy areas that are being indicated in California. I'm just going to really quick jump to 8 inches. And we have some higher probabilities there in Southern California, also in the Sierra Nevadas and some of the mountains in Colorado and Utah, where you're seeing some 80% probabilities being indicated for at least 8 inches. Meanwhile, here in the east, not a flake, not an ice pellet, nothing.
Well, nothing.
Are we done?
Zilch. Yeah, I think we are.
Well, right now we don't have any kind of blockiness, so I would just kind of say that the odds favor that we're pretty much done. Certainly not, maybe not upstate New York, north of 84, and points northward may not be done. But
now we should be very careful about saying, "Are we done?" or definitely
because
that we're done.
if we say it, it's going to happen.
Yes, exactly.
So we could approach
precisely,
we could approach this one of two ways. We could say we're done, but really deep down inside we're not done. And the snow lovers want us to say it.
Yes.
So that it guarantees that we'd get another snowfall. Or we could say that we're not done, hoping that it doesn't snow again, because deep down inside we really don't want to deal with another snowfall.
Well, there's a chance toward the end of the month that there might be snows as near to us as, oh, maybe the central Great Lakes, significant snowfall, heavy snowfall, but that's there. This is here, and we haven't had hardly anything here, and I don't really know if we're going to see any more here, but we'll see.
All right. Yeah, well, that kind of sums it up, I think.
Pretty much, pretty much. Now the 3 to 4 week temperature outlook, by the way, from Climate Prediction Center, which I took a look at a little earlier today. It was actually done last Friday. Has equal chances of temperature, near normal temperatures, I guess, and slightly above normal chances for precipitation, which would mean, and this is now taking us all the way through the first half of April, Joe, April 1st to the 14th. It suggests that we might see near normal temperatures and maybe a bit more in the way of rainy, not necessarily snowy conditions as we move into April. That's April. My
All
God, we're
right.
not even done with March yet.
The one thing that's constant, I've got the upper air on the GFS. The one thing that's been constant through this whole winter is how the upper air is set up in the western part of the United States. We just continually see energy that's up in the northwest, in the northeast Pacific, just find its way to just drop southward down into the west and then then pull out to the east. As soon as it pulls out, you start to see maybe a tiny bit of hint of that maybe there'll be a ridge uh, that'll build in, only to find that the next blob of energy drops right southward and digs right down into the west coast. And I'm just looking at here. Here we are. This is going back to last couple of days. So there's that little ridge I'm talking about in the western part of the United States, and you kind of see it there. There's a low in the Gulf of Alaska. You got a wrapped up cutoff. Of course, it got brought in the cold air that we saw. This is actually going back to the map on last Friday. So you got this wrapped up cutoff in the Great Lakes. You got the cold air that came in over the weekend. But you'll see in the west as we roll through the next 10 or more days that doesn't last there. Here comes another round of double energy, one that came in on Sunday, and then another stronger one that drops down further south and comes in tomorrow into California. And then as soon as that moves out, here comes another lobe of energy. But this one goes more into Washington and Oregon, doesn't quite drop all the way south initially until some breakoff energy forms, and then that drops southward. And then another animal drops down from Alaska, kind of breaks off from Russia there, drops across Alaska, comes southward, and makes for another vigorous cutoff off the California coast that comes smashing inland around day 10. I mean, it just doesn't stop with all this energy coming into the west. And in the meantime, we do have troughing in the east that gets set up, but it's not exactly the right kind of troughing. It's the kind that it's going to bring shots of cold air down from time to time, so you can't really warm up other than the odd day or two in between where you sort of get warm. This time of year, that's not difficult to do if you have sun, but this is not a warm pattern that is setting up for late March, early April. It's also not very blocky either, so you got to have some kind of blocking this time of year, I think, to try to pull off a late season snow event, particularly for coastal areas, in my opinion.
And on Twitter today, Dr. Judah Cohen, writing, "Happy first day of spring. I have now fully embraced spring by moving to a spring summer schedule. So no blog today. Spring advancing aggressively across much of Europe and Asia, but less across North America, with widespread record cold and even snow thanks to high latitude blocking in region." So
All right. Well, at the moment, anyway.
he's fully embraced spring.
Well, here's the next low, Joe, for California. There it is, the 982 low, 980 low. Is that a 980? I can't even read that. If it's an 80 or an 85, there's a blob of heavy rain sitting over the last number. But there's an 82 low tomorrow afternoon, sitting just east of San Francisco, and it comes in. You see the snow in the darker blue, mostly in the Sierra Nevadas and north and west of there. And then, of course, that energy is going to come east. Now, meantime, here, it looks like to me we're going to be okay rain-wise until maybe Thursday when a front tries to go by. It looks like some sort of warm front goes by, then a cold front comes through with, and then it stalls. And then, of course, you've got a high to the north, but, all the cold air is up in Canada. And there's a
You
swath
know,
of heavy rain, though, from Missouri to Ohio and Pennsylvania. And
I I am done. I'm done with yet another double barrel primary slash secondary storm that we're looking at for possibly later this week or into the upcoming weekend. I mean, Joe, I've seen this movie
yeah.
before. This this storm has had more sequels than Friday the 13th franchise.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
Well, you're
Crazy.
right though. Look at the next one. The wave right behind it, as a low in Tennessee gets to Tennessee, basically clobbers uh, the lower Mississippi and lower Ohio Valley with heavy rains, probably some severe weather in this too, which SBC already has in their long range. And then that low is an 88 low um, in Kentucky, not too far from Cincinnati, and then it becomes an 83 low when it gets into Lake Erie. Yeah, it's another animal to the west with maybe a little secondary wave that never gets going until it's well to our north. By the time you get an 89 low, suddenly makes the center jump to Rhode Island. So, yeah, that's snow for Maine, that's snow for northern New Hampshire, Vermont, and maybe northern New York, but not much more. And then that goes away. And then right behind that, after a couple of days, is another weaker low that moves through. So who knows, what you're going to get with that, if anything at all. And the only other thing I would say is, like you said, Joe, this is like a setup certainly for Saturday to be like an utterly miserable day, particularly if the warm front doesn't get
Yeah.
by. I
And
mean,
it won't.
and it
They
won't.
never get by. I mean, they get by, you on the boardwalk, in Atlantic City or Pomona down in South Jersey. Yeah, they get by. They always seem to do. And in the aftermath, the post-mortem, you're stuck up here 40 degrees with raw east northeast wind at 15, gusting to 27. And down in Atlantic City, it's 71.
Yep.
That's the way it always seems to be in late March or early April.
I'm just looking also out west, just for laughs. This whole winter has been utterly fascinating.
Yes.
For the both for the lack of snow in the east, in parts of the east, and the abundant snowfall, off the wall snowfalls, in fact, in the west. So I'm going to just bring up total accumulated precip, and just after the next 10 days, just to get a feel for this. And actually, it's pretty wet in the eastern half of the United States. You're looking at, all that purple and the darker numbers. That's like 5-6 inches for the next 2 weeks in some places. Certainly every bit of 2 to 3 inches or more over 16 days. And also, again, California does really well for this. If it becomes a wet spring out there, because I saw some reports, Joe, saying that uh, the drought is probably half over with all the rain and snow they've gotten. Well, if the spring winds up being wet there, it's going to be probably 3/4 to almost over when it's all said and done. From what I'm seeing, and as far as total snowfall is concerned, not that we really pay too much attention to this. Uh, it goes crazy in upstate New York and up into Maine, but this is really deceptive because you know uh, this is 10-to-1 ratios, and this is a time of year where 10-to-1 ratios just have a tough time happening.
Right.
You could easily cut the numbers in the Northeast in half. The numbers in the West are fairly substantial also, but in the mountains up there it gets cold, so there's liable to be more snow. But again, still a bonanza in the West and upstate New York, northern New Hampshire, Vermont, New England, Maine. I'm sorry, central and northern New England. That's the area where you would expect to see it. for the remainder of March and for the first handful of days in the month of April.
Wow. It's well, it's not that seeing that much snow in the Northeast this late in the season is impossible, but this is I'm sure a lot of people who are winter weather lovers will agree with me. This whole winter has been impossible.
It's probably more likely to happen in a year where you've had some snowfall as opposed to a winter where you've had no snowfall. Again, referring to the coastal Northeast as opposed to the interior Northeast. Because yeah, I was looking at some of the numbers in terms of normals, and it's funny because you go to Syracuse, for example. Syracuse only had half their normal snowfall, right? Albany, on the other hand, is actually a couple of inches, right around normal. And there's places you go back and forth. There, you go up north of 84, but particularly if you go up north of I-90, you've got far many more places that had above normal snowfall for the winter than below. But there's a sort of a giant hole because Buffalo is above, then it goes below till you get east of Rochester, and then the amounts start to go up again. Near normal snowfall for I think it was a little bit above, like a couple of inches above normal so far in Caribou, for example. But you go to southern New England and point southward, well below normal to in some cases in the Mid-Atlantic non-existent.
Yep. The mid and Bobby, I agree with Bobby Livingsworth that the Mid-Atlantic was indeed the big loser this year in terms of snowfall. That
Yes.
is.
Yeah. Oh, no question. No question. So anyway, let's do a little Briller Jeopardy and go from there. So
I will get.
you have it or I have it?
Well, I know I have
Well,
some. Mr. Briller
well, I
sent me
think yeah,
something.
I think I did the last one, so I've got one also, but I think it's your turn, and then I'll do it. I'll do this. The one he sent me, we'll
Okay.
do tomorrow.
All right. So here we go. The buffer wheel is spinning round and round.
And by the way, Leon Probitsky hit super chat. Want to acknowledge that. Thank you, Leon, for hitting the tip jar. Most appreciated.
I don't
And
know, Joe. The buffer wheel just is running round and round. Oh, here it is. Oh, thank God. I was getting worried. Okay, so Umbrella Jeopardy, we're covering average high temperatures in March for 5 different cities. The average high temperature that you can expect in the month of March for 5 different cities, starting with city number 1, Joe, down your way, Hotlanta.
okay, so Atlanta. I'll say I'll say 60, 65.
Ooh. All right. Well, that's what Christianopedia says, 65. Justin Vale says 68. But Joe Z got it right on the nose. 66.
WNBC.
WNBC. Yes. So that's number 1. Here's
NBC, the Nothing But Crap Network.
and you worked for them for a short while, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes.
And as I said, NBC, the Nothing But Crap Network.
Number 2, Buffalo. Average high temperature in March in Buffalo.
Buffalo, March. Okay, hold on. For the month of March, Buffalo, 150. So I'll say 48.
Okay. Well, Chuck Cardillo got it right on the nose. Chuck, I'm sorry, if you were right next to me, I'd ask you to stick your hand in my pocket and you can get the Confederate $100 because I sure as hell don't have a real $100 to just blow away on you. But Chuck Cardillo, 42 degrees for the average high temperature in March. We had as high as 57 by Joe Gaffney. Keith James said, "Hey, wow, hey now." Oh no, wait a minute. That goes back with the other with Atlanta. He's saying he's talking about 66 NBC is my new photo. Anyway, the 42 degrees in Buffalo, and congratulations again to Chuck Cardillo. Moving on to the Windy City, our third city, Chicago. Average high in March, Joe.
Chicago.
Chicago.
56,
That toddling town.
56, 44, 50. I'll say 47.
Well, that would have been very good. Frank Riccio, in fact, came up with 47. And we have 47 by Northern Grace. However, none of those will beat out Steve LaPointe, who hit it on the nose for Chicago with a 48. 48, the
40,
average
and
high.
so did Miss Fallerite, said 48 also. And,
Yes.
and Paul Roman.
And Paul Roman.
All right. Very good.
But further down the line here. How about lost wages? Las Vegas, Nevada.
Oh, God. Lost wages.
You know where I got that from, by the way?
Where?
And only those of a certain age will remember. There was a cartoon, I won't even mention how many years ago it was, Beanie and Cecil. And they did an episode where Beanie and Cecil go to Las Vegas, except when they arrive at the city limits, there's a big sign saying, "Welcome to Lost Wages, Nevada."
It's too funny. I'll say 74.
You'll say 74. Same year that I was a graduate from high school. But no, Brett R. also 74. Northern Grace 76. Frank Riccio 74. William Huber 66. No, you don't have a 66 again. Joe Gaffney 62. Steve LaPointe says simply City of Sin. Rich Romansky 75. Bobby Livingsworth 63. None of you have come close to what
I'm gathering they were all too high.
Well, actually, I mean the people who were saying 60s, like Miss Fallerite at 66 and Maggie P 67 and Johnny Quest 69, they're too low.
Okay.
Steve LaPointe almost hit it on the head once again with a 70.
So it's either 71 or 72. So, right?
Yes, it's either 71 or 72. What do you think?
71.
71 is correct. And there you go. Now, last one on the list is Philadelphia. Philadelphia. Highest average high temperature in March.
I'm going to say, let's see, 45, 8. I'll say 52.
Ding, ding, ding. Congratulations. That is the exact.
I was circling. The buzzards were circling all night long, being around the number. So, I had to get one of these.
So you hit it.
Las Vegas, by the way, was a sheer guess on my part. I just the number felt right, and I know they have the dry climate that they have there, but I don't really particularly care. I don't look at Las Vegas weather on a regular basis, if ever, unless there's something going on there. So I'm not really sure. There's nothing in my mind that takes me someplace. So I just kind of guessed at it.
I've been to Las Vegas twice. The first time, and both times in the month of May. The first time I couldn't stand it. It was like walking into an 1800 watt hair dryer.
Right.
I mean, you know about wind chill factor? Try wind heat factor. Try like 108 degrees with a 30 mile an hour wind blowing into your face. That was the other time, which was just past May. It was hot, got to 104, but it was as they say, Joe, it was a dry heat.
I've never been. I've been to Phoenix. I've been to Palm Springs, California. I've been up and down the California coast, but I've never been to Lost Wages.
An entertaining town.
Yep. Okay, so here's the deal for tomorrow, folks. There will be a show unless I cancel it. Okay, I have a I have a procedure that I have to have that I'm having done tomorrow, and so it'll depend on how I feel. Well, actually, assuming if everything goes according to plan, we'll have a show. But if for some reason the procedure is delayed because it's scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon,
Oh,
um, then therefore I will have to cancel for Tuesday. But right now there will be a show. I don't need prayers, Tom Contino. Thank you. Okay. I could use though one of a large package of Charmin. So you
no.
because
Well, li-
I'm going through it rather quickly at the moment. Um, anyway, yeah,
I
I'm having a colonoscopy. Okay.
okay.
It's
Yeah.
not, I really have no, I don't care. Some people get all squeamish at that. It's like, grow up. You're an adult, especially guys. It's like, grow up. You're an adult. I'm having a colonoscopy done tomorrow. I also, of all things, I got a UTI on Friday, Joe. So you don't even know the story about the whole story. I just told you the brief part of it, but this is hilarious. So Friday evening, I was we get the feeling that it's time to go to the toity, as you like to put it, but it just didn't quite feel right, and it sort of went downhill from there. And then when I woke up Saturday morning, not only did I have that issue, but then I also developed a low grade fever. I was like, okay, so what the hell? Obviously the two will go together. But on Saturday, I had to drive down to Atlanta, pick up my mother, and then take her to Alabama to meet my sister at Bucky's, which was great, and then drive all the way back. So I'm doing this with a UTI, and for those of you who don't know what a UTI is, it's a urinary tract infection. So I'm doing all this, and believe me, Joe, when I tell you that every rest area on the way, I left a memorial.
Yeah.
Okay. So I left at 8 in the morning here. By the time I got back home, it was 10 o'clock at night. Um, I went to the clinic first thing yesterday morning, and uh, I'll tell you a little bit more about it off camera, but because I don't want to, I'll tell you off camera. But anyway, they ran a urine test and they said I had a UTI. Uh, then they call it over to CVS, which is where I had the prescription filled. Well, CVS doesn't open up until noon. So I'm sitting outside of CVS and I'm looking on my phone because they sent me a text about the prescription, and I clicked on it and it says, well, your prescription won't be ready till 3 o'clock. All right, okay, well, I'll just go home and I'll drive home and then fine. So when 3 o'clock, I'll come back and get the meds. Well, I get home, and the first thing that happens is I get out of my car, and this is minor stuff, but it was comedic because it's like all this stuff was happening that I had to deal with on Saturday. I get out of the car, shut the door, I hit the button on the remote to lock it. The remote stopped working. The battery went dead. So I go back, I walk up to the house, and I've got an electronic lock where you got to punch in a code. The battery in the electronic lock went dead. So I couldn't unlock the door to get into my house. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Both at the same time on the same day?
Before you
So,
go on, before you go on, folks, let me ask you a question. This story about urinary tract infections, colonoscopies, broken locks, batteries running down, doesn't this at least deserve 12 more likes to get us to 100? Doesn't
exactly.
it? Doesn't it? I want to see 12 more likes in
Well,
10
that was my real concern is I have to get this colonoscopy. I have to get this done tomorrow because my next year of medication, or I've mentioned it a few times, I have moderate to severe Crohn's disease. I have to get the colonoscopy done every year so that the doctor can see that it's still, it's there, and then the insurance will pay for my medication. But I have to get it now because my year runs out in a handful of days.
Right.
So anyhow, uh, thankfully, the uh, the antibiotics worked, and and they worked really fast. I mean, I took a dose, 2 doses yesterday, 2 doses today, and that part of the plumbing is okay, is fine. The other part of the plumbing, on the other hand, is dealing with the prep that you have to take for a colonoscopy, which I will say it's horrible stuff, but it's nowhere near as bad as what it was when I had my first
Oh,
one, where you're drinking
yes.
like these 2 gigantic gallon jugs of crap, for the better part of a day. Now it's down to just 2 doses, 1 dose in the evening and then 1 dose tomorrow morning. The only thing that's killing me, Joe, right now is that I'm hungry. I've kept the meals small so that things would the last couple of days, but I'm hungry and I can't
Yeah.
eat until tomorrow, until after the procedure's done. So anyhow, good idea to get a regular colonoscopy because you don't want to. If they find polyps in there, they can clip them out and hopefully you scope clean. You don't have just have something that develops into colon cancer because you don't want that.
I had my colonoscopy about 4 or 5 years ago, and they put me to say, "We're going to put you to sleep now, Mr. Rayo." And I said, "How quickly is this going to take?" And he said, "Oh, very quick." Literally, Joe. I mean, it was like I was down and out
Yeah.
after about a minute and a half. And when they woke me up about 45 minutes later, like I said, "Who are you? Where am I?"
I have this. I don't know. This is how I've been under a few times, and every time I come out of anesthesia, with the exception of when I had my appendectomy, because when I came out of that, I was nauseous. It was horrible. I
Yeah.
was really nauseous. But when I've had my colonoscopies and when I had my ankle surgeries last year, the 2 ankle surgeries, which I was out for all of about 15 minutes, when I come out of those, I'm like a stand-up comedian. I start rattling off jokes that are, somewhere filed in my brain that I haven't thought of in ages, if would have ever remembered at all, and start, you know, putting on a show for the nursing staff. So anyway, we'll see what happens tomorrow. So if
We'll see.
I'm not here tomorrow, it's because the colonoscopy was delayed and somehow I didn't get back in time. But I'm not anticipating that.
Right.
So anyhow, um, anything else to say before we say goodbye?
No, just thanks again to Anthony Spiraccio and Liam Probitsky tonight for hitting super chats. We thank you always, and we'll be back. I am assure you, we will be back tomorrow night.
Okie doke. See you all tomorrow. Bye. Gotta
Bye.
go. Gotta go.